The Motorola Edge 40 was announced in 2023, the 17th of May. We talk about how the Edge name was stripped of meaning for a few generations of mottos, but since the 30 Ultra came out last year, Motorola has been bringing back curved displays, and the Edge 40 has one too. Gently bent towards the sides, the OLED display is covered by glass, made by Japanese manufacturer NEG, Motorola told us, so it's not Gorilla Glass on this one. The curvature allows it to have a minimal visible black border on the sides, and the top and bottom bezels are nicely slim too. Add to that the smallish selfie camera cutout, and we get a very posh-looking facade. Towards the bottom of the display is where you'll find the fingerprint sensor, and you'll get the usual complaint you hear from us. When we're faced with such a low placement, sure, you'll get used to it, but a centimeter higher would have been better. The Motorola's weight 171 grams with the plastic cover. It is not heavy, as most of the phones in the class. It's more than 30 grams lighter than a Galaxy A54. We mentioned fox leather, and that's what two of the four existing colorways of the handset have their backs covered with. Those include the Eclipse Black of our review unit, a pale Nebula Green, and Viva Magenta, Pantone color of the year 2023. The only variant with a smooth back goes by Lunar Blue. We have sort of mixed feelings about the fox leather, especially about the black variant. Ours had a tendency to get pretty filthy, easily accumulating dust and grime, and cleaning it wasn't as easy as wiping it with a cloth. But there's a silver lining. The finish is nicely soft and pleasant to touch, and it's also quite grippy. Ultimately, we'd say the fox leather variants would be the way to go as opposed to the Lunar Blue. And the Viva Magenta does look pretty appealing, though sadly, it's not available in all markets. So the Edge 40 only takes a single physical nano SIM card, at least the version we have for review. Dual SIM capability is still on the table, only the second line needs to be in a SIM. There does appear to be a variant of the phone that takes two actual nano SIMs, though we've gotten used to seeing a higher than most refresh rates on Motorola displays, and the Edge 40 continues along the path with a 140 Hz panel. It's not the 165 Hz we saw on the Edge 40 Pro, but it's still higher than the competition's 120 Hz. The Edge 40's display is also marginally smaller than the Pro's, at 6.55 inches in diagonal versus 6.67 inches, while resolution and aspect ratio are the same. When it comes to brightness, the Edge 40 is a top performer. It pushes upwards of 1000 nits in bright ambient conditions, with the adaptive brightness enabled in setting. We also measured the exact same 516 nits when adjusting the brightness manually. Color reproduction on the Motorola Edge 40 is handled in a relatively simple way. Saturated mode delivers a wide color gamut and overall very vivid colors, with only average accuracy for DCI-P3 targets. The Edge 40 Pro's display carries a Dolby Vision certification, while the vanilla model we have here only supports HDR10+. They specifically say the Edge 40 should be good for Netflix HDR playback, but we didn't get that on our unit, and it may be a matter of the streaming service whitelisting the device at some point. It will maintain 120 Hz for the UI as long as you're touching it, and it will switch to 60 Hz when idling. The Edge 40 doesn't stray from Motorola's usual path. When it comes to software, you're getting a nearly AOSP-looking version of Android 13 in this case. Unfortunately, the Edge 40 is only promised to get to OS upgrades over the course of its software support, even though it will get security updates all the way to January 2028. The Edge 40 has the MediaTek Dimensity 8020 chipset inside. The D820 features an octa-core CPU with a classic to time for configuration. We know of the memory configurations for the Edge 40, 128 GB and 256 GB, each featuring 8 GB of RAM. The Edge 40 put up a solid performance in Geekbench, posting notably higher results than that Poco X3 GT we mentioned. The Edge 40 actually wins the multi-core comparison. Naturally, the Edge 40 is not on the same level as SD8 Gen 2 devices like its Pro stablemate. Let's look at the camera of Edge 40. It has a simple dual camera setup on the back, a 50 megapixel wide primary unit and a 13 megapixel ultra-wide one. with no telephoto and no depth or macro nonsense. The primary camera does use the same Omnivision OV50A sensor. Also feature on the 40 Pro and 30 Pro. It has a 1/1.55 optical format, so it's fairly large as mid-range cameras go. Individual pixel size is 1.0 micrometers. And since it's a 4-cell design, the sensor has to buy 2 on-chip lenses. And all pixel phase detection autofocus. Over on the front, the edge40 uses a different 32 megapixel sensor than the one we encountered on the edge30 Fusion. It's the Omnivision OV3 to be here, as opposed to the Samsung S5K GD2. This one is smaller 1/3 versus 2.8 and has a 0.7 micrometers pixel size. The edge40 captures 8 megapixel selfies by default, though you can access an option for native 32 megapixel resolution. Shooting from the camera app settings even if we can't imagine why you want to. The default images are excellent, detail is great. Skin tones are lifelike. And the wide dynamic range guarantees top quality in difficult conditions too. The edge40 supports video recording up to 4K 30 frame, with both its main camera and its ultrawide on the back, as well as the selfie camera. Only the main rear camera can record at 60 frame rate, and in that case resolution is up to 1080 pixel. The selfie camera and the ultrawide can't capture 60 frame rate at all. The main camera of the edge40 captures very good 4K 30 videos. Sharpness and detail are great. Dynamic range is excellent. The ultrawide's rendition of grass and tree crowns is more toned down and arguably better looking. Dynamic range is nicely wide again, and detail is best described as okay. It's not the sharpest clip, but it's good enough. Low-light video recording on the edge40's main camera is quite good for the class. It's sharp and detailed, and noise reduction is handled well. Dynamic range is respectable, and there's minimal haloing around light sources. Colors don't suffer from desaturation either. However, the ultrawide's low-light performance is not up to that same standard. Dynamic range is limited. Shadows are underdeveloped, and there's a significant amount of noise that's pretty in your face. Stabilization is okay on the edge40 with some caveats. Whether it's the main camera or the ultrawide, walking shake tends to throw its focus off, and we're seeing some hunting. And that can occasionally happen when tanning too. Also, if you're just pointing the camera in one direction, you'd get mostly steady footage, but it's not quite entirely shake-free. The daylight photos from the edge40 main camera are good, but not without their flaws. Coming in at 12.5 MP by default, the images are free of noise and capture plenty of detail, though random textures can look artificial. We got to test the phone during an unusually dreary period in May, and finding a sunny scene was a challenge. But the overcast weather was a good test for the camera's dynamic range, and we'd say it passed with flying colors. Speaking of colors, we liked the edge40's take on reality, with only the overly enthusiastic rendition of greenery is some scenes rubbing us the wrong way.
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm seeing. Take me for granted and you know I'm leaving. I'ma take what's mine with the webs I'm weaving. I could take this crowd from seeing to believing. Got a taste for blood and my tongue keeps bleeding from the words I spit. So sharp, so freezing, so cold. Behold, frostbite they feeling. I could tear you apart or I could go heal them. Don't believe in fate, don't believe in ceilings. I just need a taste in my mind.